Why did you and 50 Cent want to unpack the homicide cases of the rappers you profile on the series this season?
Pop Smoke,
King Von, Magnolia Shorty was gunned down yesterday.
As of 2022, there's been a staggering number of rappers who've been murdered. And more than half of those cases are unsolved.
how many times do we have to see this in hip-hop?
If pop stars were being killed at this rate, there would be an uproar about it.
They'd be at war.
I'm your host, Van Lathan, and together with executive producer 50 Cent, we're here to bring these cases into the light. 50 Cent, Mona Scott Young, Vanessa Sadden had an idea. They actually came to me with it, and they wanted to do something that kind of contextualized the era that we're in with the deaths of some of the rappers that we're seeing. Vanessa Sadden had run an article for XXL back in the day. She connected with 50. 50 and Mona have a long-standing relationship. So it was something that, was very close to 50. He was shot 9 times. He's the guy who survived and went on to have a long life and a long impact in the industry. He was the one that survived. And so I think for him, particularly with Pop Smoke and some of the other rappers that we see, he saw himself in a lot of these kids, a lot of these men, and some of these women. I think for Mona, she has such a strong cultural voice and such a dynamic storytelling aptitude that having them together, they really filled in a lot for each other. And as far as me, I'm about analyzing dysfunction, like why something's happening. And so I think that even though this show is in the vein of a true crime show, and there's a lot of entertainment value in it because of that, I think that we do a good job of analyzing why these things continue to happen in the common threads.
Now, did you learn anything surprising, any new details in your research on these cases that you did not know prior to getting involved in this project that you can tell us about?
Oh, tons of stuff. I don't want to ruin anything for anyone because the show plays out in a very particular act structure. But I think some of the things that are really lending themselves to some of these killings, especially some of the more recent ones. Now, we have some older cases like Magnolia Shorty and Soulja Slim, which have a lot to do more with the street aspects of the realities of life in New Orleans. So those episodes in particular, me being from Baton Rouge, I hope people invest into those because they talk a little bit more about how specifically where you live and where you're from can play a part in the longevity that you might have, no matter who you are from those places. So they're very interesting. But as far as any of the rappers that were around for the social media era, there are some things that happen that are fixable and correctable. There are some things that we're into, some ways that social media and clout and all this different stuff are playing into these deaths and these murders and this violence that we really need to take some time to step back and litigate. And I hope that the show can be a part of that conversation.
Absolutely. So, I was watching, the Pop Smoke episode, without spoiling too much for my audience who's going to watch this. There's a female witness that you interviewed, and there's a mention that she was hesitant to speak out about anything out of fear of retaliation. Yeah. So that got me to just thinking about this series overall. Did you receive, or any of the creative team receive any pushback, maybe any threats from people involved in the victims, involved with these cases, who were kind of apprehensive about the approach to the show, didn't want you guys to touch these cases? Any pushback at all? Any naysayers at all give you any concerns about exploring any of these cases?
Quite the opposite. Most people involved in the lives, when you look at most of the shows, right, that we've done, we normally have the mothers, the friends, the sons, the business associates. We have mostly everybody involved in the lives of these performers, represented in the show.
I was with him. I can see everything.
My daddy was a known gangster in the city.
You don't ever get curious?
I'm gonna keep that to myself.
They don't care where you're at. When I catch you, I'm gonna kill you.
The rumors that they had about this guy, that he was a killer.
It was a hit from jail.
Everybody was just pointing fingers because nobody had the answer.
So mostly we didn't get very much pushback in terms of the people around them. As far as the people that are named as some of the assailants in these situations, that remains yet to be seen. Because in a lot of these cases, these people are already incarcerated, locked up, whatever. And so, that remains to be seen in terms of what they'll say or what they'll think. But we were fair. We were fair as we could be. We were as even keeled as we could be about covering these things. And I don't have any regrets about the way the show turned out.
Now, speaking of, I really do, like I said at the top of our conversation, really do love the way this show unfolds, how it's produced, how you host it, how 50's involved as well. I'm wondering, of all the cases we see profiled on this season, was there any one case that lingered with you long after production, or even now as you reflect over the season? Is there any one case that you find yourself revisiting, or maybe even putting a really vested interest in following how this case turns out, the outcome of this case? And if so, which case?
The case that affected me the most, if I'll be honest with you, all of them affected me in different ways. But FBG Duck, when people see the FBG Duck episode, they'll see how just a cyclone of mess can affect one person's life. You'll see Carlton Weekly for who he really was. You'll see FBG Duck the rapper for who he really was. And you'll see how someone's proximity to something can just end up leading to an outcome that is unfortunate. Look, we covered a lot of people, and some of the people that we covered, quite frankly, sister, had done enough dirt to where, not that they deserved anything, because no one deserved anything that they got in this show, but to where you understood that there was a lot they were gonna have to escape. And then some are just straight up tragedies. And I personally think that what happened to FBG Duck was a straight up tragedy. Mm-hmm. Just to be honest.
Well, I did get a chance to speak to 50 briefly. I think it was this past TCA. You were there as well. And one thing I recall 50 making a point in saying was that this show is not about death and hip hop. This show is not about hip hop artists who die because they're in hip hop. And I'm reminded of that after the statement you just made. Some of these players were living very kind of tragic lives.
Yeah.
And like you said, some things were bound to happen. So on that note, what are you hoping viewers are left talking about or thinking about after they watch these episodes, after they go through this series?
What we need to do differently. I think that's the whole spectrum. If you're a rapper, how differently you might need to move, some strategies that might help you safeguard your life and your property a little bit better.
Yeah.
But if you're living in the communities, or if you're on social media, some of the things that aren't working for us, and I'm not talking about for rappers, I'm talking about like around most of these guys that we're talking about, there's a lot of death, and not all of them had any platinum plaques to go with it. Some of them are people that never get to be remembered, that people don't feel like there's a reason to talk about. It's happening every day. And so there are some cultural aspects that we need to discuss, and we need to do it in a way that compels people to give their perspective on it. And I hope the show can be a part of that. But to me, the presence of social media, maybe some of the messages that we're ingesting and feeding to our children, maybe some of the things that we're empowering by our investment into. It's an ongoing conversation, and this show won't be the first time that we've had this conversation, but if I can be a part of moving it to the next phase, and I'm with that.
Well, Van, on that note, as we wrap, I want to ask you something really quickly. I mean, it goes without saying, this show comes right as we get the news this morning that our brother Takeoff has passed away, right?
Yeah.
And I'm noticing, I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but I'm noticing conversations on social media are happening right now, even within my own social circle. People are trying to figure out, based on the circumstances that they're saying around this brother's death, how is it that these guys so-called make it, but still are lured by street life lured by street activity, can't quit that life, right? And then they meet tragic ends doing things that some of us might view as, wow, they're still participating in that, or they're still living that life. Will this series help us understand why the lure of the streets is something many of these guys, and the activities of the streets is something many of these guys can't ignore when they quote unquote make it? Will that, for those of us who have that question, will this series help us kind of understand that?
Absolutely, because you'll see that it's less of a choice than you think it is.
You saying that you got money off her life insurance and then put it on the street?
Yes.
Who would climb to the second floor to find the locked door?
You seem pretty sure that somebody was paid to kill him now.
Yeah, I do.
He became a target.
We're here to find the truth.
These guys are rappers. They're #1 targets.
They're dying while living their dreams.
That's what happens when you mix street with music.
It most certainly is a choice. There's one particular rapper, right? I asked, I'll never forget this. I asked his mother. I was like, if you knew it was this hot around here, why not just leave? Because we had other examples of rappers that were still in the same place that they were, and they get to a place and they go, I gotta move to Atlanta. I gotta move to Los Angeles. I gotta move somewhere where it's not, I can go to the sporting goods store or to the mall without a gun or without looking over my shoulder or without whatever. And I remember, I'll never forget, the mother goes, well, he didn't want to leave anybody behind. He wasn't to the point where he could take everybody yet. He didn't want to leave anyone. And sometimes leaving it's a conscious decision to do it, but it's a harder decision than what we think it is. And that's not saying that they shouldn't. That's just saying that there's a human element that we never consider of what it means to still be tethered to the people that you grew up around and to the lifestyle that you grew up around, you know? And so I think, you know, we indict that idea a little bit here, and it's harder than we think, but they still should leave.